You're listening to a 4x4 Radio Network podcast.
I ran, but I made it.
You did.
Exactly. It's like a kid after an ice cream truck.
And now he forgets where he is on the script.
Pretty much, yeah. Hey, Jeebles, welcome to another thrilling episode of your favorite infotainment Jeep podcast, On the Trail with Kevin and Scott. I am Scott, the slapstick parts guy.
Who actually made it this time versus the last show. I'm Kevin, the engineer, the general Jeep tech guy.
And remember, while we will share what worked for us as well as what didn't, it's really up to you to do your own research.
He's messing it up again. It's really up to you to choose what you want to do to your Jeep. And that's important for this episode.
That's very important.
It's your choice to do what you want to do with your Jeep. So as we always say, do your research, read the instructions,
and follow them like I clearly have trouble following. But in my defense, I'm wearing contacts and that's small print, and I need it in jitterbug print.
Okay.
So speaking of jitterbug print and small print, so just wanted to say hello to everyone. Hope that you all are doing well. And this is like June 1st.
June 1st.
Yes.
And it's hopefully, as you know, we record some of these early, some of them late, some of them just on time. Actually, I don't think we've been late yet, but we're getting there.
So if we've attacked the seagull, if we've been attacked by seagull sharks or squirrel tigers, just fight the good fight, everyone, I guess. I don't know.
Well, I was going to say, hopefully the love bugs are gone by the time this is out.
Yes.
So anywho, we should be approaching the Florida rainy season.
And the heat season too, which is actually, I want to jump right into this.
Yeah.
Because I've actually, something very interesting, because I'm one of those people, when I worked in auto parts, in the auto parts store, is everyone would say, hey, my AC doesn't work. Where's your refrigerant? Okay, have you checked to make sure you have, it doesn't matter, I'm low for you. The compressor's not coming on. There's a lot of parts to these things and just the compressor being low.
There's a lot.
Myself included, because when we redid the AC in quantum entanglement, the AC didn't seem to be going very cold after a while. And I had a buddy of mine go ahead and check the refrigerant, and I was down half a pound. Now, that's basically half of a 12-ounce can. But I've been thinking about some things. The AC never really blew past 50 degrees since I've had that. And when the guy refilled my AC system, when we did all that work, he charged the AC without it running. So I'm thinking,
Did he evacuate it, or did he just...
He evacuated.
Okay, so that's good.
But he didn't run the vehicle while he did it. And I asked, when my friend topped it off, he put dye in it. And I said, should you run your AC? Because again, each person's different. I like to ask a question before I just imply.
Yep.
And he goes, oh, yeah, you always run the AC. He didn't run the AC when you did. I said, no. He goes, well, that might be why you've been down half a pound. And I said, okay, but why would my AC system not cool? Because then the few days it didn't cool to me was when the outside ambient temperature was 68 degrees. And the air conditioner didn't get below 63. I'm like, okay. So I did a little research. And I found out that the TJs, because I knew the other Jeeps had this, most AC systems you have either a thermistor or an ice-up switch. I'm, again, painting with a broad brush on your evaporator core.
Correct.
Or you'll have some other sensor somewhere else. Well, when we took
in addition to a trinary switch or two binary switches, a high pressure binary and a low pressure, or trinary, which does both.
Correct. And when we rebuilt the box, we bench built the box for the AC system. There was no thermistor in there. So I started doing some research. I'm like, I think my ambient temp sensor might be going bad. Let's Google what the signs are. AC system not cooling, but yet when it got to 90 degrees outside, that system blew down to 43 degrees.
Which is what if you look at the thermodynamics, and I realize I'm going to stretch way out here on most people, because unless you're a mechanical engineer and do this kind of stuff, but basically in the Krebs cycle, which is the Freon cycle.
Right.
42 is going to be where you end up. That's the optimum coil temperature. It doesn't really go below that unless you're having too low a Freon and it's icing up, because you don't have enough energy to move it. But you have to phase change the materials. You have to take that Freon gas, compress it to a hot gas, cool it through the condenser, and condense it to a warmish liquid, which then flows, because the gas is pushing it, to the orifice valve, which is a spray nozzle, just like a spray paint can, where it then drops pressure, which causes it to phase change back to a gas. The thermodynamic rules basically say when you phase change, you transfer energy, so it has to absorb heat to expand into a gas. Okay, so that's where your evaporator, because it evaporates from the liquid, getting cold. That process for most Freons occurs and relieves, basically creates a coil at 42 degrees. So you're only losing 1 degree from the coil to your blower vents. So that's actually pretty good.
Yes, and I've actually a couple of times I've had to put it just on non-AC vents just to get some warm air going. Ooh, because I'm sorry, this is old school, but I don't want to do it to half heat and half that, because knowing my luck, it'll get stuck on heat and I'll be dying. I'm like, I'll just put it outside here for a little while. But again,
I'll segue on that though.
what's that?
And this, I've had friends that did this who were driving their vehicles. It wasn't a Jeep, I will say that, but you're driving your vehicle through the what's the highway there through Nevada on the desert highway.
Right. Was it a dark desert highway?
No, it was not. It was a daytime desert highway.
When the cool wind wasn't in your hair?
No, it was not in the hair, and there wasn't hair to be had. Probably there was plaster to your forehead, but they were overheating. And they were fighting it, and it was not due to a fault. It was just the older car couldn't handle the temperatures, and they suddenly realized that they have an auxiliary radiator that will reject heat.
Yeah. That's the heater core.
The heater core. And so even though they're out in 125-degree weather dying, they rolled all the window downs and even propped the back tailgate open, which is dangerous, by the way. I know that, folks. But they were desperate. Turned the heater on high heat, full blower, and actually brought the engine temperature down enough to make it the rest of the way.
That's how Dory and I made it back from Lazy Springs when we plugged the radiator up with the
You used the heater to blow off.
Luckily, it was a cold night.
Yeah. So, but anyway, go ahead.
No, but it's kind of cool because, again, so I bought the ambient temp switch. Now, because I have to do it, it's been in my Jeep now on the floorboard for 2 weeks now. So I'm going to.
It's not a switch, by the way. It's a sensor.
Sensor, yeah. So it's true to form. No joking. It's as we're recording. It's in the floor of my Jeep right now. I'll get around to it.
It plugs in.
I know.
It doesn't even use a screw. It clips on.
Meaty paw behind that wiring of that winch. Come on, man. Ooh, I thought of the name for my winch. When I redo it, I'm gonna put Warn, WORN. It's a Warn winch. What do you think? Just keep the rusty cable. Keep the what's the rust? Pinta?
Well, then what you need
Pinata? I have no idea.
The what?
Pinta? They have the rust. It's not really rust. It's like surface rust. It looks kind of cool.
Patina.
Thank you. That's it.
Patina. No, what you need to do is warn in small letters like the option. Instead of XL or wait, OUT.
See, if we got the sticker machine, I'm gonna have to do that. But so that's what's new in my life, really, pretty much with that kind of stuff. But
so your point is that don't just assume
it's low on Freon.
It's low on Freon. Put the gauges on it. Have someone put the gauges on it if you don't own the gauges, and see if it's low. And if it's not, start checking other things.
Because you want to know how I came to this conclusion?
How?
Because I bought the can of Freon and I bought the tester thing for $15. And I took my big whole, 1970s night light, the black light, and I'm like out there, and the thing's 4 foot long.
Yeah.
And I have looking for the dye, and I'm under my Jeep, and everyone in the campground's like, what is he doing with a black light in his Jeep engine compartment? I'm like, I'm looking for an oil leak. Shut up. So I'm doing that, and I don't see it.
Yeah.
And look for the drips in the evaporator core, because if it's coming out of the evaporator core, you'll have drips. No drips.
The other thing you can do, folks, it's a little simpler than that, is you can go to your AC compressor. You can disconnect the little wire that goes to the clutch. One is ground and one is power. And you can put a test light on the power one and turn it on. And if it lights up, your clutch is closing. If it doesn't light up, you're not getting power. And if you're not getting power, it's usually your trinary or binary switch, or your temp sensor is telling the ECM, no, we can't turn on the AC. It's not cold enough or hot enough.
But the thing that was funny is that I put it has a little meter, and the guy at work told me, don't let it go over 45. The gauge is not a true gauge, but don't let it go over 45. It should be in green. I hooked it up. It was dead 45 and wouldn't move. And I told him about that. He goes, that's really weird. That means over the past 4 months, you haven't lost any more Freon.
Yep.
I said seals don't just so that leads more to the fact I don't think it was properly charged to begin with.
Yep.
And when it's hot outside, that AC is free. Like on the way here,
Yep.
I was freezing myself out. So I think that ambient temp sensor is my ball game. I think that's what I need to get my meaty paw in there and get it changed.
Okay. All right. If it wasn't so late this evening, we could probably go out and do it in about 3 minutes. But
Nah, come on.
yeah,
It's,
put it off for another couple of.
It's 74 degrees outside. It'll still work on the way home.
At 74 degrees, you can roll down the windows and eat a
Not
few
on
lug
the
bugs.
interstate.
Why not?
Oh.
You don't like to hear the canvas stop going.
That's a great. My quantum entanglement has Cookie Monster for a great. Now I have Sesame Stream $5. But on that note, speaking of owning
Yes.
somebody $5, as we always talk about, the interwebs are a plethora of knowledge and information
And misinformation
and
and
tons of fun to watch
human
the
stupidity
world burn.
and-
Yeah. Got a question for you.
Sure.
It's kind of an interesting subject because it ties into a listener email from Jeremy. One of the things that was brought up on the Gladiator
Hi,
forums,
Jeremy.
Hi, Jeremy, is that he basically, the owner of this Gladiator,
Okay, that was first question.
Yes.
What does he drive? So he's got a Gladiator.
yeah, not Jeremy, but this person. Well, I think Jeremy. We'll come back to that. Anyways, so this owner, which was not Jeremy,
Oh,
on the
okay.
Gladiator forums,
So this is a general Gladiator
yes,
question.
was towing a boat, and he had he had the Carolina Squat.
Okay.
He didn't like that, so he put standard air shocks on the back of his truck. Okay, and had the little valve come out of the bumper, drill the hole, the old school by the bumper, and
Yes.
and that's what he did.
Schrader valve.
And it brought the truck level again with
It
the
did.
ski boat.
It does.
And
Okay.
it goes on down the road. Well, one of the questions that Jeremy brought up, so this is where we're going to have an edumacation, is he loads his JKU pretty good,
Yeah.
with bike equipment as a bike rack with some bicycles and camping equipment. He
Coolers
gets a
and-
little bit of the squat going on.
Gotcha.
Now, he kind of asked the same question. Hey, should I get some air shocks? Should I put some helper springs, air bladders, whatever the case may be, to help level the Jeep back out? But he also is worried about articulation. And I
Gotcha.
said, well, that's a good question, and it's topical because of the Gladiator forum.
Yep.
Let's ask the general engineer.
All right. Well, first thing, I get shivers when people talk about air shocks. Today,
Good thing you're not a sailor. It'd be shiver me timbers.
yeah, well, and air shocks had their heyday in the 70s.
And the 80s. Many truck guys would use it to raise and lower the truck.
I get you. But back then, suspensions weren't engineered the same way they are today. And I don't mean that necessarily in a good way.
Right.
And what I'm going to get to is the strength of components. Today, where vehicles are engineered down to the gnat's whisker of materials to keep them as light as possible for the best economy, for the EPA standards, and they don't make a part one iota stronger or heavier than its need to meet its design. All right?
Okay.
And that may sound unfair, but it's a truism,
Yeah.
Somebody like Jeep, Chrysler, if they can save even a penny a vehicle in the tens of thousands and millions of vehicles they make, yes, sir?
Well, I was going to say, even our beloved TJs
Yeah,
were skimped at some point.
they were. That's why the sheet metal has gotten thinner and thinner and thinner for the bodies. Okay, You notice that you're starting to get some curves into your panels in the later models, the LJs and that. And you know why? Because rounded things are stronger when they're thinner.
Yeah.
It costs money to make flat panels. You think they're easier to stamp. Yeah, but they oil can if they're too thin. So you have to make thicker materials, and that weighs more, which takes more fuel. There's this chain of getting lighter and lighter and using the design of the structure to make up for just simple mass.
Well, that's like an arms race in a way.
Correct. So it's a reverse arms race technically. But here's the problem. In the older days, suspensions and sheet metal body mounts for shocks were overbuilt for the purpose of a shock.
Yeah.
Okay. A shock might only put, 100 pounds of force on the bracket as it's dampening motion, but it wasn't holding the vehicle up. But the mounts were strong enough, the bodies were strong enough. You could put air shocks on them and pick up some of the load because you're putting a lot more stress on those mounting points. And those upper bushings, those ones we fought with on the fronts of your LJs,
Yes.
the little flying saucer pucks.
Yeah, the round discs of hate.
Correct. Now they're going to be squished even thinner.
So they're now thin mints of hate.
Exactly.
Wait, you can never
So-
hate a thin mint.
I am not really in favor of air shocks because the mounting points are not really designed to take the additional load. They are dampeners, okay, not load carriers. Now, you can argue, oh, well, it takes load when the valving's closed on. Yeah, but the valving opens when you hit a certain structural limit. In other words, so many pounds of force and the valve opens in the shock, allowing it to collapse or rebound. And you put an air shock in it, it just gets tighter the harder, the further down you push it.
Right.
So I'm not a big fan of air shocks. Can they work? Yes. Can they have side effects like crack sheet metal on the shock mounts? That too. Okay.
Right.
So you have to take that with a grain of salt. Now, you can put on overload springs, depending on whether you're talking about coil boosters or leaf springs. But they will, as noted, Jeremy asked, those could reduce your articulation a little bit depending on how they're mounted.
Right.
A true overload probably wouldn't hurt extension, okay, because true overload is the bar that hangs below your main leaf pack in a flat leaf spring system, and as you droop, that becomes the main pack becomes more arched downward, and the leaf spring just hangs out there. It will be more likely to pick up a stray rock or a tree branch,
Right.
But
But what about coil springs?
coil springs, now you got a problem there. If you put a heavier coil spring in, raise the spring rate, it's going to be harder to stretch and harder to compress, but it'll carry more weight. Okay. You can make it taller and do like Metal Cloak did and a few others now are doing with the dual rate spring packages that stay closed and open. All right. That's expensive,
Right.
but that will, keep articulation, maybe even give you a little more. But most of those aftermarkets, unless you pay a lot of money for a custom wound coil, they're not going to add more capacity. They're designing their lifts for greater articulation at the factory's intended load rates. Okay.
That's why a 4-inch lift might be a 2-inch if you're heavily.
If you've got all your sheet metal and shields and armor and
winches.
guards and winches, so they don't know. Some of them are marketing for modified vehicles only spring packs, and you can talk to manufacturers about that. The other option that comes out is for coils is an airbag in the coil. Okay.
Right.
There's also external airbags, but they're usually for heavier framed vehicles. I don't know that there's anything made for the Jeeps. All right.
Yeah.
I do know when I did the research for my RVs, which are based on commercial truck chassis, add-on airbags on their own purchase inboard to the frame are available, and they're like a second set of springs. Those are okay. I'm going to say they're going to affect articulation as well because the bag is actually bolted at the top and the bottom to the mounts and would restrict articulation. Once you get to the limit and the bag is stretched as far as it'll go from a drooping axle, it's not going any further. It's just the same as a strap.
Right.
Okay, so that's intended for vehicles that articulation isn't key. However, the one exception is the in-coil bag. And we did a little research online before this show and found out that, yes, there are in-coil bags made. And they're kind of neat because they're virtually no tool required to install them. That's
Right.
kind of a misnomer.
You still need
because
to get the spring out.
well, you don't. No, actually, you don't. The bags usually collapse down enough that you can, take the shock off and extend the spring, and then you can work it into the coils. Right through the coils, but that varies. But
Have the grease on hand.
let's go ahead and say that you got to tip the top of the coil off the pocket to slide the bag in. And if your vehicle, and according to the one thing we read, I know that the Gladiator spring perch for the coils has a hole in it already for the airline to come out.
Right.
And then you do need whatever you're doing for fittings and whatnot to strap the lines in. These nylon lines, 1/4 inch diameter. Those aren't going to hurt. They can't really do anything but help, and that's because they're not really attached to the top and bottom plates.
Right.
Even if they have no air in them or even are fully charged with air, the axle can still go down as far as the factory designed it to go down. And with sway bars disconnected, as long as your spring itself doesn't come unperched,
Yeah.
the airbag's not going to go anywhere. Okay? And upward articulation, well, obviously, if you have it full of air,
Yeah.
but it's still pretty much going to go up to the bump stop and stop, you know. Turns out that they are available for LJs and JTs. And they really, what they do is they simply increase your spring rate
Right.
depending on the pressure you put into them.
Right. You can't carry more weight.
You're not increasing your GVW of your vehicle, okay? You're still you're just increasing the pounds per inch of your spring combination now.
Right.
You're still limited. By the way, folks, GVW is usually not limited because of your springs or your axles, by the way. It's limited by your braking, okay?
Right.
It's how much your vehicle's frame can carry safely and stop. It's not about getting going and your engine power and your axles and wheels falling off. They're usually well overbuilt because if you think about what an axle goes through, even driving down the highway and hitting a pothole, if they were that fragile, you know, we'd have a whole lot more pothole tires ripping off.
Yeah. Because that's, go.
No, and I was going to say, I do remember that happening when I was a kid and cars were nowhere near, you know,
engineered the way they are today.
But the real driving on the GVW is your handling and your braking. You know, can you stop that thing at that gross vehicle weight or gross combined vehicle weight pulling a trailer? Right. And people say, well, I have trailer brakes. Well, yeah, but the design is based upon what if you have a trailer brake failure? Can you still get it safely stopped?
Yeah.
Okay. Otherwise, you become that thing they call a runaway. And those wonderful ramps, if you've ever been down mountain passes where you see those gravel roads off to the side with arrows that say runaway ramp. And it doesn't mean that it's where two people are running away to get married. And it kind of goes off the road and becomes soft gravel and goes right up the mountainside. Yeah. And they get used far too often, most of the time by loaded trucks whose brakes have blown out. But there's enough times on records of vehicles using them as well when brakes fade to the point that they can no longer control. You can say, well, we live in Florida. A runaway ramp is a Hardee's parking lot, you know. We don't have a downhill, but the point is the gross vehicle weight is made as the average of all conditions. So I think if you're looking for something you can put on a coil-sprung Jeep to help with, you know, what did you call it, butt squat?
The Carolina Squatter, a little bit of sagging.
Carolina Squatter. You might want to look at the airbags that go inside the coils. And the Schrader valve's okay, but you don't tend to adjust it. The best systems out there use a level sensor and an onboard air pump. And look, our onboard air pumps, most Jeeps either have them or want them.
Exactly.
And with a level sensor, you don't have to do anything. As soon as you start to crank the trailer tongue down and the back of the Jeep starts to squat, all of a sudden you'll hear
and
it'll come right back up to meet. The other thing that's really nice about that, leveling your Jeep, and this is important whether you do it with airbags or if you use a load leveling hitch, is the fact that too much Carolina squat, as Scott calls it, affects your steering geometry. Well, as you squat down and lift the nose of your Jeep up, you're actually taking away caster, because caster is the angle of the Jeep, the tires, and the further you lift it up, well, actually, I'm sorry, you don't take away caster. You're changing the caster.
Right.
The higher you lift it, the more you loosen the front suspension, the more you're going to pull the axle to the side, because your track bar is going to pull the axle sideways as it swings down its arc, and your steering geometry will change. And that's where you get that loosey-goose towing feeling where it's like, I just don't feel like I'm steering as well as I should be.
Light.
The front end's real light. So leveling your vehicle out doesn't add weight capacity, but it keeps your steering geometry as Jeep intended.
Well, and that's one thing I want to touch on, because everyone talks about the max tow package on the Gladiator, and that gives you a 7,600-pound towing. and like I think it's like a 600-pound tongue weight. Mm-hmm. Okay. And the regular ones only have like a 400-pound toe weight, and the problem is that putting those bags on, you do not increase that tongue weight.
You do not. You do not change any of that whatsoever. What you're doing though is restoring your ride geometry back to stock.
Right.
And it's kind of an ideal way of taking that suspension and stiffening it up when you need it, and then letting the air pressure out. The only thing you will note with most bags is they will tell you you cannot run them at 0.
Correct.
You have to run them at a minimum of 5 PSI to keep the bag in shape in the coils so that they don't get pinched.
Yeah.
And to me, that's a small price to pay. Most of us probably put enough junk in there that 5 PSI is a good thing. Now, bad news, they're made for stock springs. You have a lift kit with longer springs, more space, the bag's probably not going to work.
Well, some manufacturers hopefully
will make a taller bag to fit in there.
Yeah, and that's where we talk about contacting manufacturers and talking with them.
I wouldn't put a bag inside a metal cloak spring because the double wound coil and the fact that the springs can go upwards of 3 feet long when they're extended. The problem with that is the bag could bulge between the coils, and then when it comes back down, it could get pinched.
Yeah.
So you need to talk to them and tell them your situation, and don't get upset if they don't have one that fits your rig. And people say, well, see, that's the thing about air shocks. Well, I get it. Your other option is to go in and have a competent person look at the structure and say, can I reinforce it or redesign the shock mount so that if I put air shocks on, they can actually help become a load-carrying member.
Yeah.
That's pretty expensive, too. The key here, we're just trying to keep you from hurting yourself.
Yeah.
There really isn't the perfect answer, although I think airbags come the closest, internal spring airbags probably come the closest to a good answer. And that's why you see them used on all kinds of trucks, trailers, RVs, both in-spring airbags and airbags alone.
Yeah.
They can, but they are, the other thing I'll throw out about airbags, I won't say downside, they are consumable. They have a lifespan.
Yeah.
And the good news is, in most cases, unless you're the one day you're carrying a heavy load, when they wear out and start leaking,
it's not the end of the world.
there are some quirks. And I just have to mention the quirks if you're going to run airbags. Most of the basic systems are what they call a T-pipe system, where you have one Schrader valve that goes to a T, and the T goes to the 2 bags. Those are a little dangerous, in my opinion, and I've got to stress my opinion, because if you lean to one side, cornering, okay, and you get a heavy side, the air runs over to the other side, which actually makes the lighter side jack up even higher. So it's can decrease stability in those situations.
Didn't think about that.
Well, and there's an easy answer. Okay, you either use a check valve system where there's a check valve in each one of the lines, or the easiest one, most of them, is you use a dual Schrader valve, and you have a right and a left side. And then what you do is you put the T in your filler that you hook on, that you screw onto the ends, and then fill the one spot there. And it puts equal air pressure in both, but as soon as you unscrew it, that comes off, and there is no path, and the 2 independent right and left Schrader valve closes. And then you have 2 isolated sides, so you don't get that pressure shift and lean. Okay? The better systems out there, it's not the airbag that's better, that have the compressor and the controllers, will tell you the same thing. They can have a single T system or a double T system, and the double systems have independence so that they don't shift air pressure from the high pressure side to the low. They actually keep them balanced so that you don't have that pressure shift.
That's good to know.
So just that little thing about airbags.
Well, that's cool. And I have, Jeremy, hopefully that answers your question.
And didn't drive you, if you're still listening.
No, he's good. Hey, we're going to take a quick little break here, and then when we get back, we're going to, Kevin teased it last show, we're going to talk about the Quirk. Not Commander Quirk from the Ratchet & Clank video game series. We'll be right back. Hey, listeners, just want to take a quick moment, like always, to remind you about our Patreon page, our YouTube video page, and also the 4x4 Radio Network. I can't remember that for some reason every time. I do apologize, Tony. So again, check out the YouTube page because we hopefully will soon be doing videos again. Mm-hmm. That's the plan. And then again, we're going to be Patreon exclusive at first, and then eventually released to public. But again, check that out, and we are going to get back to the action as we speak. Here's the door. Man, it sounds so nice. I think I need to oil it. Sad thing is, though, that door noise is yes, just like that. So, Kevin, you teased it. We had enough, come on, enough with it already. What did you tease?
All right, folks. How many of you out there, and I know Scott's one of them, drive a TJ, LJ, and even some of the later YJs? Have you noticed a little quirk? I'm going to ask you because, I bet you I'll be hearing people running out to their garages for this one.
Okay.
I'm going to use my TJ as an example because that's the easiest way for me to use it.
Yep.
But when you go out there and you've got side marker lights, if you didn't delete them, and cut your fenders off, and then you have a forward-facing turn signal driving lamp as well.
Right.
All right. This doesn't affect your headlights or your fog lights, but just the front corners. Mm-hmm. And during the day, if you're driving and you turn on your turn signal on that side, you'll notice that the side marker light and the turn indicator flash in unison.
Correct.
And they both should be amber by federal law, just for your hand. Even if the glass lens is clear, like some of us, we have yellow bulbs in there.
Correct.
However, turn your headlights on so that your running lights are on. You'll notice your marker light is on and your marker/turn signal forward are on, but they're at kind of a slightly dimmer light level.
Right.
Now, if you hit your turn signal, what happens, Scott?
They wigwag.
They wigwag. They go back and forth. All right. Yet, as soon as you turn the lights off, they blink in unison.
Correct. Which is really weird.
You turn them on at night and they wigwag.
I decided it's magic.
It's magic.
It's magic.
What this comes from, and we've talked about this in other shows, is make sure your ground is really a ground. Okay? What? Because there are, if you have switched grounds, which are very common in automotive uses these days, where you don't switch the power lead, you switch the ground.
Right.
Your injectors are grounded. Your coil packs are switched to grounds. They're all switched grounds. So when you test for ground, you could be plugging into an active circuit.
Correct.
Before the switch rather than after the switch. All right. Well, our friends at Chrysler realized that had a very useful quirk. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to try and go through this vocally, obviously, because this isn't video and I can't draw you a picture. But this is the weird trick. Your side marker light, my side marker light, both our TJs and LJ, obviously, don't have a ground.
Yeah, I think it's the same way on JK's too.
I think it is too. We just couldn't find the wiring diagram before this show.
Yeah.
There's actually two wires, and they tee off of the marker light hot lead and the turn signal hot lead.
And not on any ground.
And no ground. The plug body is plastic. The housing is plastic.
It goes in a plastic fender.
And, actually mine goes in the edge of a plastic fender.
Yeah.
You're right, on the side marker
and
light.
the JK's too.
So there's no ground, yet the light works.
Again, it's witchcraft.
And there's not even any smoke, Scott.
I know.
Okay. How does it do that? Well, it uses the concept of floating ground, which is exactly the same concept that we talked about in the wiring shows a couple of years ago, where, when you connect the radio in to what you think's a ground, but it's actually a switch leg for something that's ground switched, and you turn the radio on and create an alternate ground, and suddenly your wipers are working.
Yes.
Or oddities like that.
The Jeep needs a priest.
Correct. Well, Chrysler figured that quirk out and put it to use. So let's go through a little scenario. Daytime.
Right.
I have two wires coming from my light switch assembly. Okay. My multifunction switch, as Chrysler calls it. And it goes through the panel and goes out down let's pick the driver's side fender well. And as it reaches the front, there's a couple of little wires teed off, and they run over to the side marker light. And the wires continue on forward to the front marker turn signal there in the fender.
Right.
Now, you follow there. Oh, wait a minute. There's 3 wires there. There's a black one as well as the 2 colored wires. And that black one does go right back. And, gee, there's a ground bolt right behind your driver's headlight. There's one on both sides. And that's the ground for the turn marker light. Now, understand that the side marker light uses a, was it Type 97 bulb, the little tiny
194 peanut bulb.
194 peanut bulb. Thank you. I knew you'd know the code, Mr. Partsman. And the front turn signal marker uses a 2-filament.
1157 or 1156. No,
Yeah,
sorry,
call them
1157 or a 3157 if it's a plug-in.
Correct. And ours are the flat plug-in, not the turn.
Correct.
The quarter turn. So they're the 1157, right?
No, if it's a push-in, it'd be like 3157.
3157. They're both what I call a Type 57 bulb, which is a dual filament bulb.
Correct. That's the important part.
One is low light. The other one is a brighter light for you. The brighter one is typically your turn signal. The lower one is your marker.
Correct.
Now, that front bulb behaves perfectly as you would expect. One of the wires, your turn signal one goes to the brighter filament, and then that filament goes to ground through that black wire, and the other wire goes to your side marker, goes to your lower intensity filament, and that goes to ground. Perfectly normal.
Right.
Now, what about those 2 legs that go to that side marker light?
They both come out the positive.
They both come off the positive side, yet it works. But it works 2 different ways with no magic. What happens here, folks, is during the day, you hit your turn signal. Your marker lights are off. You have power on that turn signal line that's blinking on and off intermittently. So the front bulb is glowing, not glowing, glowing, not glowing. The side marker light sees power coming in on the side marker wire.
Correct.
And now the power goes through that filament and immediately comes back out the other leg, and it hits another hot lead. But that lead's not hot right now because your side markers are off.
Correct.
Now, it fills it immediately, the wire. If you think of it as water, it's a good way to think of it. Running back to the multifunction switch, it got nowhere to go because the switch is not closed. So it goes forward, and it goes up to that other filament in the front bulb. Well, it's still a filament, and guess what the other side of that filament's hooked to?
The ground.
The ground. So your side marker light actually grounds through your filament for the marker lights.
Correct. Which is really confusing.
It is, but the thing is, well, why doesn't your side your marker light or your parking lights? I think it's a better way to describe. Most people think of them as parking lights.
I just got it.
Yeah.
I just had the aha moment with how you're describing it, how it all works.
So the parking light, the little bulb doesn't leave enough energy for the parking light filament to light. It still has electricity throwing through it, but it doesn't glow.
Correct.
Now, that's all well and good during the day. Well, that means that they blink together.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is where it gets a little twisty. It's night. You pull your headlights on, or rotate to headlights on, or just parking lights if you're kind of in that little back side of the drive-in theater. Now,
Hashtag 1950s calling.
60s and 70s too, but
Sorry.
hey, there's a resurgence after this whole thing.
Yes, which is cool. But moving on.
Now, what do I have? I have the opposite scenario with the side marker with the parking lights
And
on.
I just got it too.
The power now runs down that leg. Now the blinker one is off. Okay.
Correct.
So the power now goes through the leg that was just acting as the electricity out on the sidebar, but now it's coming in that way. And those little filament bulbs don't care which way the power is running.
Right.
So it goes out of there, it comes back, and now it hits the turn signal circuit. And just like before, it runs back to the switch. Well, it can't do anything back there because the switch is not connected.
Right.
It goes forward, and there's the high filament that it goes through and
acts
goes
as
to
the
ground.
ground.
So now it glows.
Opposite of
And
the
now,
other.
well, no, that's on with your marker light.
Right.
All right. Now, you go at night and decide, I'm going to put my turn signal on so somebody doesn't hit me as I'm coming out of the drive-in.
Mm-hmm.
So you hit your turn signal. Well, turn signals blink.
Yes, they do.
So all of a sudden, I now have my parking light power is on, and my turn signal light is on.
Where's your ground?
I have no ground. I have 2 high leads that turns the turn signal filament on. That's full power to the turn signal filament,
Right.
and full power to the marker filament, and no power
To the little bulb,
to the little bulb. So
which turns it off.
which turns that one off, because 0 and 0 is off. 1 and 0 is on. 0 and 1 is on. But 1 and 1, which is power and power, is off. So now the side marker light turns off when the turn signal turns on, because power is actually blocking the flow to ground. But when the moment it goes back off on the blink,
It now has a ground path.
it now has a ground path, so it comes back on. So therefore, during the day, your side marker and your turn signal blink in unison.
Right, because it's using the ground path of the running light.
Correct. But at night, they blink in opposition. Wig-wag, as you put it, because we're actually removing a ground, not removing power. Everybody
Right.
gets stuck with, well, to turn a light off, you turn off power. But if you lose the ground, the same thing happens.
Yes,
Why is that important?
because a lot of us are putting aftermarket fenders on.
Well, and not only that, but a lot of us want to use LED lights.
Correct.
Well, for the wig-wag to work, current must be able to flow either wire, either direction.
Correct.
LEDs do not allow that, because
Right.
LED stands for light
Emitting
diode. And a diode is a one-way valve for electricity.
Correct.
So if you do that and you put the LED in, you get to choose. Will it work during the day or will it work during the night?
It's kind of like we did the label off the can of food. It's like, is it be corned beef hash, or is it going to be cream corn?
Well, and I'll tell you, folks, I beat my head over that, because you know
Yeah.
me, I'm one of these that just said, not good enough for me.
Yeah, I got to
I
know why.
want to have LED lighting, and I don't want people to know I've modified it. So I want the typical Jeep. For those that know me, know that I have wide fenders. I run the factory style side marker and turn signal / parking lights. They're clear with yellow bulbs in them, just because I like the clear on the black.
Yeah.
But I want the wig-wag at night and this unison during the day. But I want it with LED.
Correct.
And is it necessary? No, folks. It's a little bit of anal retentive craziness, but I finally figured out how to do that.
You like what you like.
I like what I like. And I went online and found out, you know what? There's a lot of Jeep people like me who want to run that side marker light in LED and have it perform like the factory. And it turns out, folks, that it does not require relays. I've seen people that came up by using 2 relays together, and that's the electromechanical method. It does work. I mocked one up on a circuit board, and it's kind of wild to hear click, 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 because you got clicks going inside, you got clicks going outside, and it just didn't look too cool.
It's also cumbersome. You're
It's
adding
very.
many more steps that could go wrong.
Turns out that if you treat it as the nighttime circuit essentially being an AC current, that instead of going from AC is alternating current. So if you're dealing with 12 volts AC, it goes from negative 12 past 0 to plus AC, to plus 12, and then back down again. Well, okay, just move the scale. And we go from 0 to 12 to 0 to 12 to 0 to 12. Well, there's a neat circuit out there. In fact, your Jeep already has it in it. It's built into the alternator. It's called a rectifier.
Yep.
And it takes AC, or alternating current, and it doesn't care whether it's alternating across 0 or just 0 to another current and back again. And it will rectify it to DC,
Which is direct current.
which is direct current. And it takes 4 small Zener diodes, which I'm not going to try to explain, but a diode we just talked about.
Google
were
it.
One-way gates. And the only reason I use Zeners is to keep the voltage loss down. 4 of them arranged in a very simple pattern, soldered together and spliced in between the wires. And now my side marker lights behave exactly like
An
factory,
incandescent bulb.
just like incandescent bulbs. I didn't have to add grounds. I didn't have to add mechanical relays.
Yep.
I didn't have to do anything other than
A little bit of
a
legwork.
little bit of legwork, and they fit inside
wire
split
loom.
loom inside a shrink lamp themselves. So I will probably write up. I may do a small video on it, and we'll post that later. And I may do a small write up and put it on our Facebook page for those that are interested. It really ended up being very inexpensive. The Zener diodes, I think, were $5 for 100.
Yeah.
And you need 8 to do your Jeep.
So you get
And
a
when I
few
say
extras.
they're little, I mean they're about a 1/4 inch long and about an 1/8 inch in diameter.
Yeah, 100 of them fit in a little tiny bag.
In a baggie, not even a sandwich baggie, a snack baggie.
Not even a snack bag. It holds like 3.5 Cheez-Its.
Yeah. So it's a neat idea, but I just thought I'd share that with you. I found it fascinating. Hopefully you found it interesting that Chrysler took what is a wiring quirk that drives people crazy, adding aftermarket electrical appliances, and
used
turned
it.
it into a feature on their vehicles, and they added it to the Jeep when they got the Jeep Corporation.
Yeah.
And if you go back and look at the old New Yorkers and the other big Chrysler boats that had the little chrome blinker lights on their fenders,
Yes.
those are wired the same way. So they also blink in alternate, and they made them so that they're the side marker circuit as well. So your dash would flash your left green arrow, and then as soon as it went off, the little fender one would glow yellow.
Yeah.
And then that would go off, and the green arrow
That
would
was
come
the
back on.
coolest features. The Dodge Dart 72,
Yep.
I wanted to be my first car ever. I love that flying buttress back window and all that.
Yep.
And I love this. Some of the ones I saw had that feature. I'm like, that is so cool.
And it turns out that it's a quirk. It's
Yeah.
an electrical quirk of cheating using the light bulb as a ground.
Exactly.
How's that for a twist?
That's pretty awesome. And it really, a lot of people probably wondered at the beginning of this conversation, well, what the big deal? Again, I made the mistake when I added LEDs to my YJ. You know, all of a sudden, half the time, one side would blink, the other side wouldn't. Now, had I known this back then, I would have known, oh, yeah, let's just move the wire around and do this. Boom, I would have been done. We're trying to help you guys, give you the information out there when you add these aftermarket fenders like Brian did.
Yep.
And cut the lights and do all that kind of stuff. That especially with the JL now.
Yeah.
The JL's got some really cool. The JT, to throw you another curveball, it goes from white LED daytime running lamp to yellow. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And so that's kind of like almost probably the similar way I have
No,
to guess.
no, that's that. When you're dealing with LEDs and solid state circuits, you can play lots of games with it. You can do something called an AND gate, and I'm getting kind of computer techie here, but you can have a logic circuit that if this light's on and that light's on, energize that light. The orange LED.
Right.
But if this light's on and that light's not on, do the white light.
Okay.
Okay, so, and there's just, computer logic is phenomenal.
Okay.
In fact, if you really want to be picky, the little circuit I just mentioned with 4 diodes we called a rectifier is called a NAND gate, N-A-N-D.
Okay.
And they have logic tables. And if you ever look up the OR gate, the AND gate, the NOR gate, the NAND gate, they're negative. It's all that means is negative AND, negative OR. You'll see a little logic table, and it'll go input 1, input 2, in columns, and output. And you'll see 1 being positive.
Right.
1 and 1 might equal 1. Or in our case, that circuit, 1 and 1, 0. 1, 0, 1. 0, 1. 1, 0, 0, 0.
Oh no, he snapped. He's talking computer.
No, well, problem is your Jeep is full of it. Computers, that is.
Yeah.
That is the magic smoke that people talk about getting lost, is those logic circuits. And the fact that the logic used to only be in the ECU. And then it crept over and infected the dash and became the body control computers.
Man, we have multiplexers in each door of our vehicle.
And that's what I'm saying. And now it's creeping out to the devices.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is in your vehicle, you actually have chipsets in your lighting that are determining what switches are on, what light do I power. Nowadays, you're getting a single power line on a lot of vehicles that goes to an area, and it's just power on.
Right.
It's just 12 volts out to the back end of your vehicle. And all your ECU does, or BCU, BCM, whichever you want to call it, is it just basically sends a digital code of milliamps to the back computer that says, oh, he hit the brakes, turn on the brake lights. It doesn't actually power the brake lights.
Right.
They're powered from that one power cord back there.
Right.
It just says, hey, taillight computer, turn on the brake lights. Oh, nope, take them off. Nope, put it back on. I wish he'd make up his mind. Take it off, put it on.
Yeah.
The whole thing. Oh, turn signals. Hey, both light switches are on, daytime. Turn signal and headlights. So use the amber. Oh, no, okay. Run it through because you can get a tricolor LED that you basically, it's the same bulb. It's just got different leads for different colors. Yeah. And it's going to continue. We're going to get to the point now where the bulb itself will probably become smart, And imagine when things get crazy, like your wiper could eventually say, hey, I'm worn out, and send a signal back to the computer, and you get a warning that your wiper blades need replaced.
Why do you have to ruin my day? He smiles. It's like the engineer's revenge to the parts guy.
Well, no, it's just this is the way technology is going.
Yeah.
Now, I do want to jump in before we leave the garage and fulfill my promise that we make, we both make, but in this case, it's my turn, to our listeners of tell them what didn't work.
All right.
And this one's mine, folks. And this goes back a little ways, a couple of months ago. And no, Scott doesn't even know about this one.
Yeah, I'm over here doing delicious.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. As we talked about, we tore the engine harness out and repaired it. Mm-hmm. And that was a problem, and we did fix that.
Yes.
That was blowing fuses. That was not my current drain, though.
Oh.
No. In fact, it took care of the shorts and some of the drains, but those were not the primary one that killed the battery.
I am now wanting to hear this.
Yeah, this one's rather embarrassing, folks. This is Stupid Human Tricks personal.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. But it's also proof that the littlest hole can drain the lake.
Okay.
How's that for a lead in?
There you go.
All right. And the clue was put to me by a friend who saw the fact that, okay, you park your Jeep and sometimes it sits for quite a while.
Right.
If we're not going out on Jeep events and stuff and we're in personal distancing and stay-at-home quarantinings and all those kind of things. And I have a very good battery, but even it gets down to where it gets to 11 volts and things aren't happy. And he's like, well, that little blue light's on the dash, that's your steps. And I went and I looked and go, no, it really isn't the steps. So I tried, okay, I can lock the steps up, turn the power off, and kill that.
Right.
And I still was losing battery current. So you probably remember there were many days that you would come over and the battery tender charger was sitting on the fender of the Jeep.
Correct.
Because I still hadn't found my mystery drain. Now, it was a slow, very, very, very slow drain.
Okay.
I could let the Jeep park for 2 or 3 weeks and not notice.
Right.
Okay, but it was the more extended times. And even then, the battery, even when it was still starting, it was still kind of like, this really isn't, so I just kept it on the charger.
5 more minutes.
Yeah, exactly. It did. It felt that way. And I was talking about another problem with a friend of mine, and he had come over and we were chatting, and I was leaning on the hood of the Jeep. And not the hood of the Jeep. Actually, I'd had the hood up, and I was leaning on the radiator support, the grill.
Right.
And my arm felt something warm. Yeah. Scott's over there with a quirked eyes.
I got the Spock eyebrow going right now.
And my first thing was, whoa, nothing should be warm. This is not supposed to be on. What in the... And I'm like... And he goes... My neighbor, Dwayne, goes, what's the matter? And I said, it's warm. And he reached over and he went, yeah, it's actually pretty hot. And I looked down. I must... Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned.
I am waiting for you've been leading this on good.
I had used my winch to pull well, I've done several things with it over the preceding 4 or 5 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Pulling shrubs out, pulling the mower out of the pond when I slid down a wet hill, just little odds. And I mentioned before, folks, that I have an anti-tamper switch on my winch
we talked about
built
that.
into the dash, which is a switch that switches a relay on to energize the ground for the winch.
Okay.
That was on. I had forgot to kill the winch enable switch. The winch enable switch powers a relay to close the ground contacts. And it is not run through the ignition circuit deliberately in case you need to use your winch when you can't turn the engine on. It is
Ruh-roh.
fully powered. Now, the average micro relay only pulls about 300 milliamps. But when it pulls it 24/7, 7 days a week, 4 weeks a month, 280 milliamps will drain a battery. I put my ammeter on my battery leads the way I had tested it before, reached inside, and flipped my winch isolator to on, i.e. to isolate my winch, and power dropped to nothing except the maintenance current to the ECM. I feel like an idiot.
Hold on. Nope, you feel like Kevin.
I now have a new project. There is no indicator light to tell me my winch is activated.
Oh, you're getting a lighthouse.
I will.
I got one of the leftover red LED lights I didn't use as a tail lamp. It's a 4-inch one. We'll put that. We'll just drill a hole right in your cluster.
No. It's just going to go down where the winch switch is, and somewhere in that lower panel, when you flip it on, it's going to be either. Well, red is trouble, but I'm probably going to put it in orange or something like that, so that does this sound familiar, Scott? This was my lockers.
Yeah.
Until I wired the dash locker lights to remind me that turn your lockers off, dum-dum, you're going to draw the battery down. Well,
Do you have any other lights in the dash you could use?
I could not find anything in the dash that
Okay.
had anything to do with winches, and the switch itself is not lit. If I could illuminate the switch, and I may try that first, I may see if I can find a winch enable switch. I did find one, but it was not illuminated. If I can find one that's illuminated, then that's going to be put on that same circuit so that it illuminates to tell me,
Hey, silly.
winch is engaged. It's not engaged as in running, folks. It's a security. If you look at almost every brand of winch, there's a smaller gauge black wire that comes off of the controller, and it is a ground, and it says put it to ground. And
Right.
it's there because if you disconnect that ground, the controller will not engage the winch.
Correct.
It's
safety feature.
It's just a safety feature. I put it on a relay and put a winch activate switch into my cluster down where TJ has the 4 switch positions. And I've been really good about remembering to turn it off. But it just goes to show that even the tiniest little hole
Will
can
drain a
drain a
lake.
lake, given enough time. And I chased phantom current draws. Now, the good news is the harness did need to be rebuilt. We did have shorts that were blowing fuses in my
Right.
harness, so I don't feel too bad about the effort that we put in there. But the current draw, that was just stupid human tricks.
Mm-hmm.
And it just goes to show that even if you built the bloody thing, you can still misuse it.
Well, again, I think we'll give you a hall pass this time. we'll let you lick your wounds. We'll get one.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, I'm
and
checking.
now I just got to figure out where to put the reminder lights. See, idiot lights aren't for idiots; they're to keep you from being an idiot.
Oh my goodness.
So,
well,
with that, I will bow my head and humbly walk out of the garage.
you can get the button this time. Make sure you turn it off.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, quick question. While we're on the subject, again, we thank every one of you guys for everything you guys do. Again, you guys and gals, messages and stuff like that, show ideas. Remember,
Love show ideas from you.
yeah, please keep those coming.
That way I can save telling my stupid horror stories where I make mistakes.
Hey, you're talking about the guy who's got the Switch sitting in his dashboard that probably ain't going to be done for another 3 days. But and by 3 days, I mean 3 months. But no, on that note, though, again, like I said, like we always talk about, check out the Patreon page, the YouTube page. There's a lot of good content there. We'll get back to those videos. Again, small businesses like, rentwranglerfix.com, Mark and the guys, they've been teasing some really cool stuff coming up. Hopefully we're going to get a chance to talk to them again. Again, just the usual gang of suspects on our web pages. Go ahead and check all those guys out. And on that, just, again, be cool, be patient with each other. Hopefully by the time this comes out, the tiger squirrels haven't eaten us all up. And life will be good.
Susan will have one as a pet.
That and a giraffe.
Yeah.
So on that note, guys, I think we have run out of time.
Yep. As we always say, we've talked enough. Time to lock ups, put the Jeep in 4-low, and hit the trail.
And make sure the switch is off.
Yeah, well, or on as it needs to be.
Exactly. And thanks for spending time with us. And as always, wheel legal.
Tread lightly.
And remember, take nothing but pictures, memories, and your trash when you leave the trail.
And be sure to check in on for our next podcast of On the Trail with Kevin and Scott.
Coming straight to you on June 15th. Wow. This year is speedballing by.
Well, when there's something that focuses your attention, it tends to go fast.
Exactly.
And staying healthy and staying alive is worth focusing your attention on.
Exactly.
All right,
guys.
folks. Bye.
Bye.
Proceeding has been provided for entertainment only. Proper service and repair procedures are vital to the safe, reliable operation of all motor vehicles, as well as personal safety of those performing those repairs. Standard safety procedures and precaution, including the use of safety goggles and proper tools and equipment, should be followed at all times to eliminate the possibility of personal injury or improper service which could damage the vehicle or compromise its safety.
What he said. Thanks a lot for listening, guys. You guys have a great day.
Bye.
This has been a Bent Axle Media production.